Spotlighting Hawaii's leaders.
We want to bring in Governor David E.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Lieutenant Governor, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. Mayor Derek Kawakami.
Thank you so much, Senator, for being here.
Spotlighting the issues.
Where is the virus right now in our community?
How much is this overall going to cost the state?
How are you responding to the community's concerns? Talk about the level of citations that you guys are writing.
Spotlight Hawaii with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei Suji on the digital platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. This episode of Spotlight Hawaii is brought to you by Beachside Roofing.
How's it going, everyone? Thank you so much for tuning in here on this Aloha Friday. I'm Ryan Kalei Suji, joined by Yunji Denise, and this is Spotlight Hawaii on the digital platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. And Yunji, this morning we are diving into a topic that has a lot of people in our community concerned and a lot of people in our community talking about.
That's right. We're going to take a deep dive into what's happening at Red Hill. Joining us now from the Board of Water Supply is Ernie Lau. He, of course, is the chief engineer and runs that agency for the city and county of Honolulu. Good morning.
Good morning, Yunji and Ryan. Thank you for having me.
We are so happy to have you on. There's conflicting reports in the paper leading the news this morning as to what is contaminated, conflicting reports by the Navy itself. Can you give us some clarity this morning, just so that we're all starting on the same page? As far as you understand it, what are the areas that are contaminated?
From the Navy's own admission, we know they've said that their Red Hill shaft, their drinking water source closest to the fuel tanks, has been contaminated by petroleum. I think in particular they're saying JP5, which is a form of jet fuel. What we heard a day or two ago from the Navy was that they had a detection of a high level of petroleum as diesel at their Aiea Halava shaft, which is across the valley from the Red Hill fuel tanks. Remember, the fuel tanks are like on the Honolulu side of Halava Valley, and on the Ewa side of Halava Valley, you have our Halava shaft, and you also have the Navy's drinking water source, which they've turned off also. That report was given to us by a Navy officer, and about 2 hours later, we got a call from that person, somewhat walking back, that the sample was actually not out of the source, but some other things. So my question back to that person was, if you say it's not out of the shaft or the aquifer there at their Aiea Halava shaft, then where did it come from? Where did that high level of contamination in drinking water come from? What is the source?
And when we focus in on that Aiea Halava area specifically for now, has the Board of Water Supply been able to do any testing of their own? And have you heard back from the Navy? I mean, you did have that press conference yesterday asking for clarity. Have they responded to that?
Let's start with that. So we just heard through another party that the Navy is very open to sharing information with us. And that's a positive sign, a positive development. We do have a weekly standing meeting to get updated by the Navy and the Department of Health each week. So that's a movement in the positive direction. But one thing that's still troubling us, the monitor well data that is from the network of test wells below and around the Red Hill field facility. The latest information we have only goes back to April of this year. So we're looking forward to more current information. And with the feedback we're getting through another party that the Navy is very open now, we're preparing a letter officially requesting this information and to be kept updated on a very timely basis going forward. I'm sorry, Ryan, you had another part of the question. I'm getting a little old here, so I'm kind of forgetting the questions.
Problem. Yeah, it was just getting clarity on if any other testing has been done in that area by the Board of Water Supply.
Yeah, that's a very important point. So we are starting to test now on a weekly basis from our water sources. In fact, yesterday we received the results of our test sample that we sent to the laboratory on the mainland last week. We got that result back today, and I'm glad to report there were no fuel contaminations detected in that test. fuel components detected in that test. We are expecting more test results coming back from our Aiea and Halava well and our Aiea Gulch well, Halava Shaft and Mauna wells next week. So we're now in this weekly testing mode, testing 5 of the closest wells that we have on the border water supply system to these Navy Red Hill fuel tanks. And we actually have been testing for about almost 8 years now, and have not detected any fuel contamination in our water sources.
That is fantastic news. Those test results, I'm sure, are just so welcomed by everyone in our community. I want to get some clarity on how the dynamics of the well itself, you likened it in past news conferences to 2 straws drinking out of the same glass. If that water is contaminated on the Navy side and we're sipping from the same glass, how is it not contaminated on the Honolulu side?
Okay, I'm going to modify that analogy of the glass of water here that I've used before. So picture a glass of water, but also put a very clean sponge in it. And that clean sponge with all the voids and holes in the sponge represents the lava rock. And truly our underground aquifer is actually fresh water in the cracks and crevices of the lava rock. So you have a straw, the Navy straw on the Honolulu side of that glass. And you have the border water supply Halava Shaft on the Ewa side of that glass. So Navy was pumping out of their side or sucking out of their straw while we were sucking out of our side of the straw. Navy stopped pumping Red Hill Shaft, so nothing being sucked out of their straw. And there's fuel leaking into the glass of water, into that sponge. And we continue to suck out of that sponge. Eventually, we're going to pull it through the sponge across the glass and pump it into our system. Which is why we shut down our Halava Shaft, because we don't want that to happen. And it does take time for the fuel contamination to move across the valley. We don't know what the time frame is, but we kind of estimate it's between maybe 6 months to a year if we kept on pumping and the Navy was not pumping at Red Hill. So we can't take that chance. What's happening in that glass, in that sponge, is actually hidden from sight. You can't see, it's deep underground. So we have to err on the side of caution to avoid creating a similar situation for our water customers. We don't want to do that.
And what would the process look like to flush out, say, that sponge and to flush out, the aquifer and that area to ensure that it is clean? I mean, you said over time, it could be 6 months, could be longer. But is there any specific process, that can be done by the border's water supply, or is it just a natural process that will have to take care of itself?
That's a good question, because we think the responsibility for cleanup of the aquifer of that sponge made out of lava rock deep underground full of fresh water, if it's contaminated with fuel out of the Red Hill facility, we think it should be the owner of that facility that's responsible, not the Board of Water Supply. So not the BWS water customers paying for cleanup of the aquifer. That should be completely on the Navy, on the federal government to do that, because they're creating this problem. Whether or not it's even possible, that's the question we have. We're not sure. It probably depends on how much fuel leaks out of the tanks. If it's a large volume, will it even be possible to do that cleanup? Remember, in these World War II tanks, there's over 180 million gallons of diesel and jet fuel right now sitting only 100 feet above our drinking water aquifer. So the longer that fuel stays there, the risk to our aquifer continues, and over time, I believe it's growing.
So if it takes 6 months to a year for that pollutant to essentially migrate over to our side, does that mean that that well is essentially inoperable for the duration of that time and beyond, however long it takes to clean up? And if that's the case, will we have enough water just as a community, or will we have to go to further restrictions?
That's a very good point. Right now, and just to be very honest to you on this thing, is the contamination levels, and we'll hopefully get more data about how badly Red Hill Shaft is contaminated. But if the contamination levels are extremely high, we will probably not be able to turn Halawa shaft on maybe for years, maybe not even ever, because we can't risk drawing the fuel into our water system like it's happened, unfortunately, to the Navy's water system. So the only alternatives there is to kind of look at can we treat the contamination to remove it from the water to make it safe to drink. That's if the level of contamination in the aquifer is low enough to be treated. But if the levels of contamination in the aquifer is so high, it may become untreatable. So we'll have to look at development of alternative or replacement wells, some other place that won't be at risk for fuel contamination. In the meantime, we only have certain wells that we can use, and we're going to overstress by over pumping those wells to meet the demands of our customers in the city of Honolulu from Halawa to Hawaii Kai. Remember, for us, the supply has to equal demand. If demand starts to get higher than the available supply, then we're going to need cooperation from our customers to reduce their water usage. And right now it's voluntary. At some point, it could even become mandatory restrictions on water use, such as, maybe you irrigate every other day instead of every day of the week. Definitely, we'll look at maybe no washing of cars with hoses. You use a bucket or other ways to conserve water. I hope we don't have to do that. But in reality, I just need to be upfront with everybody. Water demand right now is low, and it's usually lower in the winter, cooler months and when we have more rainfall. But it's the hot, dry summers that we're going to see in the upcoming year. That's when demand goes to its highest. So we'll be providing feedback to our customers on how we're doing, and also ramping up the conservation message with them. Right now it's voluntary cooperation, and I hope to keep it that way. And I believe everybody will pitch in and kokua together to make sure that the demand for water doesn't exceed our available supply. But if that's not the case, then we have no choice but to take stronger action.
One of the questions and topics that we also want to address is just the overall testing. We have a few questions on that, but I want to bring in a question from George here, who's asking, is there an actual test that is or can be done on the aquifer, or are the shafts our testing point? If you can speak to where exactly those tests are coming from.
Okay, so for us, at our source, it's coming out of the source itself. We have to pump water out from deep underground to draw a sample, or turn on a pump at Halawa shaft to draw a sample. Although we're looking at different ways, like can we take it from, if you've been down into Halawa shaft, you go into that viewing tunnel and you're able to see the top of the water table there. Another way, can we just draw a sample out of that pool that we've taken many people to see out of that pool and test that for fuel. The tests are very important, but those are not the only test locations. There is also these, Navy has drilled about 17 or so monitor wells, which are like small diameter test wells that go all the way down to the water table. And in those test wells, they can draw a sample of water at the water table and test it for petroleum contamination. So there are about 17 of them. Most of them are on Navy property. There's a few in the valley, Halawa Valley, and we would want the Navy to test more frequently there and to share that information with us. That'll give us a better picture of where the fuel contamination is moving with the groundwater deep underground, and in which direction it's traveling.
Going back to those restrictions, we know now on the Navy side that there are over 90,000 people impacted by that well being shut down on their side, and that they're starting to try to figure out how to give those folks water. Do you know how long this could last for the folks on that side? And the other question is, where is that water coming from? In other words, will that be another stress on our system? Because presumably that water has to come from somewhere.
So to answer your first question, how long it's going to take for the Navy to clean up their water system to restore normal safe water service to their customers, I really don't know. petroleum contamination is something that we've never dealt with, but how do you clean up a system that's being contaminated, portions of it with petroleum like jet fuel or diesel? We think it's going to be very difficult, and it could take a while. But I do wish the Navy hopefully the best, that they will be successful in doing that. But fundamentally, first of all, I think they need to be really clear on what is the source of the contamination to their water system. What is the root cause for the problems in the water system? Once you clearly identify that source, and it could be more than one source, then you have a better shot of how do you clean up the system. The Navy has three major water sources that we're aware of. One to the west near the Pearl City area called Waiava Shaft. That's their largest water source on their system. The Aiea Halava Shaft, which is closer to Aiea Town as you get into Aiea Town, just as you get off the Monoa Freeway, and also the Red Hill Shaft or Red Hill Well, which is right near the Red Hill fuel tanks. Those are the three water sources. And right now, two of the three water sources are out of commission. So they're depending on that one large source at Waiava to supply the entire Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickams water demands. We've been told that we've heard that the water demand for the Navy is something in the order of 18 to maybe 22 million gallons of water a day.
Wow. One of the things that we are also hearing is about the testing requirements is that unfortunately we don't have the capabilities, and we know that you have been sending samples to the mainland to get a more detailed, at times seeing parts per billion testing to allow the capacity to really inspect this water at a higher level and being sent to the mainland. If you can clarify what capacity we have here locally for testing, and how often are you sending off these other samples to the mainland now that we have found these, we have these reports of fuel in the water?
The testing capability we're aware of that exists on island to a certain degree of accuracy or ability to test to the lowest amount is with the University of Hawaii. We learned from the health department that they had sent some samples to the University of Hawaii, but their University of Hawaii was unable to really quantify down into the parts per billion range what they were finding in terms of fuel contaminants. I know that the University of Hawaii, and we see the emails that we're getting copied on, they're actively looking to see how they can get down to the parts per billion range, be able to quantify and type the type of contaminant. We don't have the capability on island. We rely upon a very capable laboratory on the West Coast in California, and I believe the Navy and Department of Health are also doing the same thing. Development of on-island capability, given the circumstance and the fact that we probably are going to be in this situation for a while, it really makes sense. But it needs to be done by a party that can be viewed as a trusted laboratory, objective and not biased, and that will provide a high level of high quality testing that we can be confident with the information, the results from that laboratory. So my thoughts on that is I think the Department of Health has a large lab in Pearl City. I'm not sure if given more resources and staffing, they could actually build that capability over time for in-state testing and be in support of all the water systems in Hawaii, including the military's water system for petroleum testing.
You mentioned bringing in a more neutral party, if you will, to do some of that testing. And Senator Schatz has called on the EPA to get involved. Have you had any discussions about any kind of federal resources to come in and support the testing and just the overall management of this issue?
No, I haven't. I think Senator Schatz, referred that the EPA should take responsibility for that. I think EPA is already in discussions with the Department of Health and been to a certain degree involved with this situation. But I don't I'm not aware if the EPA themselves has a laboratory in state that can do this testing also. So they may also rely on the mainland lab. So at the end of the day, how much better is that really? But the EPA is ultimately the responsible party at the federal level for the Safe Drinking Water Act regulations, and they have delegated authority to the Department of Health. I think in this case, I think the EPA needs to be a lot more active and visible in the discussions. We do plan to reach out to the EPA and Department of Health and talk to them about this, because they have been working together since 2015 on the administrative order on consent that was supposed to necessarily address this situation and prevent this situation. And unfortunately, really unfortunately, it happened before the actions could be implemented under the ALC that would have prevented this. And that's why we've been urging for nearly 8 years now that action needs to be taken quicker.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we can expand upon that just there. I mean, you're hearing from top officials in the military and in the Navy that have said that they will work with the state, that they are making this a top priority, that they will cooperate. And yet we do hear some of that pushback and that counter statements that are being made. I'm wondering, in your experience in working with the military and Navy, have you noticed the change over time and this commitment to wanting to improve relations with you and with the Department of Health? And how is the overall relation right now with the military and the Navy?
Ryan, we've kind of been dealing with the Navy and the Department of Health and the EPA for nearly 8 years now. And I would say with the Navy, they're very good with saying things with words that sound good about being committed. We're working with you. We want to protect this resource as much as you. But what's the disconnect here? And I'll be very frank. It's their actions are not consistent with their words. What they say is not necessarily what they do. So many years ago, they told me that they are as much concerned about the safety of the aquifer as we are. Yet here today, you see them kind of waffling in response to the Director of Health's emergency order. If they truly meant what they said or are saying, that they are concerned about the aquifer and they want to protect it, then they wouldn't be fighting or resisting the Director of Health's emergency order. They would just say, yes, Director of Health, let's sit down and talk about this. Maybe we want to modify certain conditions on what is realistic, but we agree with your order and we're not going to fight it. We're going to implement it as quickly as possible. And one part of that order is the defueling of this facility as soon as possible. It makes no sense for them to say one thing, that they are wanting to protect the resource, and do another thing, and which actually speaks louder than their words, by actually refusing to comply with the order or resisting the order. So they should not be challenging it. And how dare they challenge the Director of Health's emergency order, which has been issued to protect the health and safety and the environment for our community.
I sense so much passion from you. And in a prior news conference, I know that you got pretty emotional when talking about this issue. You've been sounding the alarm on this for so many years. And now what feels like the worst has actually happened. How are you feeling about what's happening right now?
Deeply saddened. This is all avoidable. This is a tragedy of what we're experiencing right now. It's a disaster, and it was completely avoidable if action had been taken earlier, because the information was clear, at least to the Board of Water Supply, and that's the information from the Navy's own reports and data. So just sad that we're at this place. but I can't just go in and in my bed and pull up the covers. We have to do something. So let's all work together to address this problem, to get the Navy families back on their homes with safe drinking water, but also to reduce the risk to our aquifer, which unfortunately may be damaged beyond recovery. We need to take immediate action. And I kind of sense that the decision makers are starting to align in that direction. And unfortunately, it's taken a terrible situation like this to be like the wake up call and get everybody's attention. So now, I know I pound on the Navy, I know I pound on the health department, and I'm trying to control that, trying to tone that down, because I know what's important is that we just need to put aside our differences and work together for the good of our community, for the good of our resource. So it's time to just be honest. Make your words and your actions match.
I know many people and we see it in our comment section, really do appreciate your honesty and, just your transparency in this whole effort and bringing this information forward to the community and to the public. I'm wondering if you can, as we wrap up here, there are still a lot of people out there who are just concerned about their drinking water. Those who live in this area, as you say, from Halawa to Hawaii Kai, who want to know if their water is safe. Your final message maybe this morning to those watching about this, and if the water that they are drinking is safe, and how you can guarantee that.
The water that they're drinking is safe, and we're taking extreme measures like even turning off our 3 wells that supply Honolulu and IN Halawa areas. We've lost now almost 12 million gallons a day of well capacity. We're doing those extreme measures to ensure that fuel from the Navy's red fuel tanks that got into the aquifer is not going to get into our water system like it has with the Navy. And we're doing weekly testing of the 5 closest wells. And Halawa Shaft, we just got back the results yesterday. No detections or fuel. The report is already on our website. It was posted last night, borderwatersupply.com. Press on the red hill button and it'll take you right to the full water quality report. The other thing too is if people are concerned about their water, and naturally in a situation like this, people get worried, they get anxious and fearful. Please call us. You can reach us at 808-748-5041, 808-748-5041, and we'll send our water quality division staff to reach out to you, and if necessary to even do tests of your water. We have fielded quite a few calls already, and we welcome more calls. But call us at 748-5041.
Ernie Lau from the Board of Water Supply, thank you so much for giving all of your time and information this morning. We appreciate your dedication to protecting the community's water, and we really do appreciate your time again. Thank you.
Thank you, Yunji and Ryan.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Well, great to hear from him, and really some great news amidst all of the tragedy there with what he calls a disaster that is unfolding because of this leak at Red Hill. They don't know the source of the petroleum going into the water. However, they do know by reports that he just talked about, testing that was done, that the Honolulu side of the Halawa Shaft so far has not indicated any contamination. However, he laid out, and if you missed it at the top, it was a very interesting and thorough analogy of what this all means. Basically, he said the water is in the shaft like a sponge, and that we're drawing from 2 sides, and eventually the petroleum products could migrate over to the Honolulu side. And for that reason, the Halawa Shaft will be shut down, it sounds like, Ryan, for some time.
Yeah, and he even said it may be shut down permanently because of the fact that it may just be get to a point where they are unable to fully clean it or find a way to ensure that the water that comes out of that area will be clean enough to drink. And so it would be a big blow, obviously, to the Board of Water Supply in how the water that is allocated from and that comes from that area would have to essentially be coming from another source. And you heard from him saying that they would have to look for an alternative aquifer or an alternative source to expand upon in order to meet the demand of this general population of the urban core of Honolulu, because we know that this is such an important aquifer to this region. However, he has also highlighted the sometimes discrepancies in what we're hearing from the Navy. Of course, we've heard over these last few days and weeks, top military officials committing to their involvement in this process and really being involved in ensuring that a clear solution is determined and that they can move forward with the state. However, Ernie Lau saying that it's just those words are not matching the actions that he's seen thus far from the Navy.
Yeah, and in the meantime, you have tens of thousands of people from the Navy displaced because of a lack of clean drinking water on base and no indication as to when those families could move back into their homes. That, of course, is a challenge, along with a bunch of schools that are on those properties as well. And you really hear a lot of frustration and what he just calls sadness about this situation. This is preventable, and yet it is a disaster that is unfolding right before our eyes. And he talked about just the importance of identifying the source of these leaks. We still do not know where this is coming from, but we do know that there are contaminants in this water. We so appreciate Ernie Lau joining us this morning. He really is fighting for our community and fighting for the clean drinking water. And we know he's so busy, so we really do appreciate it.
Yeah, we hope to have him back on this program, in the next year and in the next month to give us an update on how things are going, because as he said, this could be an ongoing process and something that they're going to be dealing with for some time now as they look to figure out how they're going to manage things moving forward. Of course, this is an issue that is impacting the residents of Honolulu, and so we'll be speaking with our mayor. Mayor Rick Blangiardi will be joining the program on Monday. We'll be talking to him about this as well as other issues, of course, with the new variant of COVID-19 that is found in our community, as well as a number of other issues that are impacting the city and county of Honolulu. All of that happening on Monday at 10:30 right here on Spotlight Hawaii. Until then, have a safe weekend and aloha.
Aloha.
This episode of Spotlight Hawaii is brought to you by Beachside Roofing.